Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help. And King of Floors, your vinyl, laminate, and engineered flooring superstore.
Guest of the day. We have two of them today. One of them is Shane Malloy standing by. Today's guest brought to you by Langley Chrysler. They have the vehicle for your next summer adventure. Whether you need a Jeep for the beach or a Ram for the fam, you can save up to $12,000 online or on land at langleychrysler.com. It's Donnie and Dolly, the team, on check, and we're joined by Shane Malloy of Hockey Prospects Radio. The NHL NHL Draft 2021 version starts today. Canucks pick 9th. At least they're scheduled to pick 9th overall. We'll find out. Shane, thanks for doing this. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. It's a fantastic day. It's busy, but if you saw me in my office with the 2 monitors, the computer, the TV, the Comrex box, and all the other stuff surrounding me, you'd actually start to laugh. Like, what just happened there? Looks chaos.
It's Christmas for you, isn't it, Shane?
I love it. I love the draft. It's one of my favorite times of the year, and it's not just the anticipation of where these players are going to go, but it's the disappointing part of not being on the draft floor when it's happening, commentating, because I get a real kick out of watching the families and the friends celebrate with the players,
Yeah, right.
And then the players come up and we get to interview them. It tugs at the heartstrings because of how much you can see the joy in everybody's face and the excitement, and it's palatable. And so from a selfish reason, I really miss that part of the draft. And then the after parties where you see them out with their families afterwards, it's a really cool experience to watch and to see happen.
Shane, in the past, the Canucks at number 9 have drafted the likes of Bo Horvat and Cam Neely, and going way, way back, a big defenseman, the late Bob Daly. Any chance they get a player of that caliber at number 9 in this draft, if they draft at number 9?
If they pick at number 9, I think there's a possibility of getting a player of a similar caliber as Bo Horvat. I won't go Cam Neely because he's a Hall of Famer and one of the best power forwards to ever play in the game and a game changer. And Bo Horvat's an excellent number 2 centerman in the NHL. So if you get somebody of that caliber, and I think they can, I think the Vancouver Canucks will walk away, very pleased with their 9th overall pick. And at the end of the day, I think we'll see what happens with the goaltenders. Whether, I'm not sure where they're going to go. And I've had a lot of conversations, and people are still, around the NHL are not quite sure where Jesper Wallstedt or Sebastian Coates are going to go, because if one of those goes before 9, that may push an additional player down to Vancouver that they didn't anticipate, which is a benefit to them.
Kent Johnson of Port Moody, suburban Vancouver, could be available at number 9. Your opinion of him as a player, Shane, and are you somebody who has concerns about a young player drafted that high playing in his hometown?
No, I don't think that's a problem. I think you have to look at that player as an individual and look at his personality and how he views himself. Self-awareness, I think, is really important, especially even at that age. And then understanding, what his goals are, what's his passions, why he does what he does. I think those are really critical components when you have those conversations with him. And then I look at his body type. He's very similar to Kyle Turris when I watched him play in the BC Hockey League. Top, kind of 6'1", lanky kid, really needed to fill out, and Kyle did that in his time. And I think it's just unfortunate for Kyle that he was pushed in the NHL a little bit too early. Mm-hmm. But Johnson has dynamic playmaking ability, and I really like his hockey sense is very, very good, and his ability to create time and space and draw defenders towards him, make teammates around him better because of that. I think that's an added element to that the Vancouver Canucks could use. They just have to be patient with him, and he's not going to come and play next year or the year after that. But certainly a player, maybe in 3 years, comes into your lineup and it can provide some creative spark to your top 2 lines.
Shane, let's talk defense. If the Canucks are going to pick a defenseman at 9, being told that Hughes, Edvinsson, and Clark are pretty high on their list, I don't think Hughes is going to be available at 9. Nobody does. Can you tell us about Edvinsson and Clark? What do you think of those two?
Well, I don't think Edvinson's going to be there either, to be honest.
That's a
if
good
he
point.
does, well, that would be a coup for the Vancouver Canucks from my perspective. And Edvinsson is like, think about when Matthias Ohlund and Edler came into the NHL for the Canucks. Sort of mash those two players together, and that's a better comparable for what Edvinsson can do. Big, strong, smart, moves the puck well, skates well, can eat up a lot of minutes, could be on your second unit power play, first unit penalty kill. I think I project him as a number 2 defenseman, so a guy that you could match up with a more offensive player, and he can take care of business, but he has enough intelligence and wherewithal to jump into plays and make things happen from that standpoint. I just think he's a guy, like, you look at him and go, he's a rock type of defenseman. So if he falls to 9, I think Jim Benny better be screaming on the phone, take the Swede, and run with him. So if that happens, great for them. I think if you look at Brent Clark, in terms of how many offensive defensemen are in the NHL, it's really important, to look at that. It's really rare. There's maybe 25 to 30 of them in the league. So if there's an offensive defenseman available at the draft, especially someone of that offensive caliber, then I think it's incumbent upon you to take him because there's so few. It doesn't matter if you have 2 or 3 of them in your lineup already because he's not going to be ready for a few years anyway. And if there's an offensive defenseman available, you take him. Don't worry about, we need different types of defensemen. You can get defensive defensemen in free agency or at a trade at a much lower cost. Are there some concerns about Brent Clark's skating? Yes. A lot of it's based on his body because he grew really quickly, 3 to 4 inches in a really short period of time. So he's still sort of awkward and not terribly athletic, and he hasn't quite figured that out, and he'll need some work in that respect about having a more attack posture, and that's going to help. His skating just has to get to average at the NHL level. And I think if his defensive habits get to average, then you're going to have a defenseman who can run your first power play unit and then not be a liability defensively. So he's a defender, maybe as a number D4 defensive ability defensively, and then as an offensively he's like a number 2 or number 1, then that is, a very good pick at number 9. But once again, I look at scarcity. How few offensive defensemen are there and how valuable they are in the NHL and how tough it is to get them in free agency or in trade. So for my money, if he's there, I'd pick Simon first and then Clark, but if Simon's gone and Clark's available, then I think that's a stabby pick for the Vancouver Canucks.
Shane, talked to a couple of NHL scouts last night. Boy, was it tough not being at the rink and watching these kids, and you just miss so much. Body language, all that stuff. When they look at this draft 3, 4, 5 years down the road, how much of a factor is that going to be? Those scouts not being at the games, they had to do so much video work. The video is not the same, Shane, and you know it.
Oh, 100%. Now, it's also a matter of how you use video. So I know in my conversations with NHL teams, they use it differently. So it'll be interesting case study to see which teams were more successful, and then how do they use video, and how did that impact, and will that be a learning experience for a lot of the NHL teams? And you're right, you miss a lot on video. I use video to supplement, but nothing replaces being at the rink because there are certain things you just can't get from video. So at the end of the day, obviously the players miss a lot of games played. I think that could potentially impact their development. So I think teams are going to have to be much more patient with this group than in past years and give them that extra year that they're going to need. And then we're going to find out which teams were better at video scouting and collecting all types of data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and be able to synergy and put that information together and then come up with a decision. So I think of all the past years, of all the years that I've been covering the draft, and this will be draft number 22, this is the most fascinating draft in that respect.
Hey, Shane, the Canucks, and maybe a little strange to say this now, but going back to 2017, I think they surprised a lot of people taking Elias Pettersson as high as they did. Is there a dark horse player that the Canucks might grab at number 9 that might surprise some people and end up being a pretty good NHL player?
Well, if they don't take who I think they're going to take, then it might be Matt Coronado. So from Chicago Steel, 5'10", 185 pounds, he's a sniper. And once again, I talk about scarcity. How many snipers are in the NHL? How important it is to get pure goal scorers on your team. So he may be a player that surprises some teams. Think about now. Coronado should go somewhere in the top 15. But think about like Alex DeBrincat in terms of what he did for Chicago, and he was smaller and he got drafted in the second round, and he's blown up to be an excellent goal scorer for the Chicago Blackhawks. So that may be a player that they look at him and say, well, boy, we just can't discount that goal scoring. So we'll see. But I think there's going to be players above Matt Coronado that I think the Vancouver Canucks are going to take.
If indeed Owen Power goes number 1 to Buffalo, who should the Kraken take at number 2?
Oh, Matt Beniers.
Okay.
I think he's the safest pick. Yeah, and we talk about on our show a lot about projecting ceiling and floor in a player. And for Matt Beniers, one of the things I really appreciate about him is that his floor is really high. So it's very unlikely that he is a number 3 center. Like, I think he's at worst a number 2 center. And he might project into that number 1, depending on his development and how much time the Kraken give him, perhaps in the AHL, and don't push him in too quickly. He has that potential, but I don't think he's going to drop below a number 2. So to me, that's such a safe pick for an expansion franchise to get that type of centerman and be able to be patient. And he could play for 15 years. He's that type of player. He doesn't have any major flaws in his game that are going to take a long time to develop. So that's what I expect Seattle to do.
Enjoy Christmas. Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a great day, and cross your fingers for your Vancouver Canucks.
Hey, and Shane, before you go, where can people find you? We still got Shane?
We are on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio on Channel 91, and we are going to be on all day today. So basically 3 o'clock Pacific up until probably 10 o'clock Pacific tonight.
Outstanding. Thanks as always, Shane. Appreciate it.
Take care, gentlemen.